We're joined by Simon Breheny, Director of Policy at the Institute of Public Affairs. And Simon, welcome
G'day.
to the couch. Hi.
Hi. Good to be back.
Exactly. So you've been away to a spot that's potentially looking at a lot of destruction.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I just came back from Honduras and Miami last week, spending a bit of time over there, and to get back just in time and just before Hurricane Irma is about to hit, I think was good timing, but very, very sad for the people who are over there and having to deal with the very serious consequences of that. I mean, but, you know, it's one of the most significant hurricanes in that area ever, and certainly for the Caribbean, I think this is going to have some pretty devastating impacts.
It's a monster. I was just seeing the Financial Review story there. Many papers covering this hurricane as well. It's heading towards Florida, of course, but let's not forget it's already wreaking havoc across the Caribbean. Yeah, the Northern Caribbean in particular has been hit very, very hard, as you can see from some of that imagery. It's just extraordinary, the devastation that that nature can sometimes wreak on us, and my heart goes out to a lot of people in those areas, particularly friends of mine who I was spending a bit of time with last week. So very sorry for what they're having to go through at the moment.
And from what you saw, you know, are the people prepared? I believe that there are many places that didn't evacuate despite, or couldn't evacuate despite warnings.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was there a week ago, and there was no indication of how serious this was going to be then. So you know, there wasn't even any talk about it at that stage. So I hope that people were able to get prepared as quickly as possible. But these things do happen within the space of days, and I mean, at least in Florida's case, they've got the resources of the federal government behind them now, so hopefully they're going to be able to deal with it. But for a lot of these other islands in the Caribbean, it's much more difficult. They don't have those sorts of resources behind them.
Now, the debate over energy policy is still very much front and centre in the headlines this morning. The Age, amongst many papers, looking at what to do about this Liddell coal-fired power plant in the Hunter Valley. Yeah,
indeed, and it's a really interesting story because, of course, we're talking about some fairly drastic measures. The government is talking now about whether or not it might consider taking a stake in the Liddell power station. This plant has become the centre of the debate now over energy over the last week. AGL has said that they're committed to closing it in 2022. And the government is asking that they keep the power plant open for at least the next 5 years, for 5 years after that. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I mean, really, you know, AGL have got the government over a barrel here. The government have made it really clear that they want to keep the power plant open for another 5 years. AGL have said, well, no, it's not in our interest. We want to close it by 2022. That's the end of the life of this plant. So, you know, I can't see anything happening other than AGL getting an excellent deal out of this for their shareholders. I think that's the only...
Involving potentially lots of government money.
Yeah.
Probably lots of money, yeah.
We're getting viewer comments on this yesterday. People are crying out for leadership on this issue, coherent leadership policy and just doesn't seem to be forthcoming. Yeah,
well, the market's just been stuffed. Frankly, in Australia. I mean, the energy market in Australia is in a very, very, very bad way, and the fact that the government is trying to I mean, they're really trying to have their cake and eat it too. I mean, there are policies that they are putting in place that are increasing costs, and then they're also trying to deal with the consequences of that through maybe government ownership or part ownership of a power plant.
Yeah. And so you're also looking at an article in the Australian.
Yeah,
we do have to talk about the
ABC,
which is always in the spotlight.
So in the Australian today is a great story about media execs demanding.
Well, I don't think it's great, but go on.
ABC curbs. Well,
so what do they want?
So I think the concern from a lot of media organisations that are not the ABC is that the ABC is competing with commercial operators. Now, the reason they're concerned about that is because as a public broadcaster, the ABC has, you know, there are things that the public needs through the ABC that it should be provided with. That's the argument for the ABC. And the argument from some of these media chiefs is that what the ABC does is infringing on their turf.
But the counter-argument is clearly that if we weren't making ourselves, and I say we because obviously we're on the ABC,
yes.
If the ABC does not make itself relevant to as many people as possible, and that will mean obviously potentially coming up against other media outlets, that it would be called irrelevant, and therefore there would be a call for no public broadcasting money.
Yeah, I think what they're saying is that there is a very clear rationale for public broadcasting and that the ABC should sit within that, where it's trying to gain audience for audience's sake. That's going beyond the rationale for public broadcasting.
Isn't that the point of a broadcaster, is to get and to serve audiences?
Well, a commercial broadcaster for sure. I mean, they should be competing on a level playing field to try and make sure that they're getting as many people watching or listening as possible. But for public broadcasters to compete with commercial operators, that's not what the rationale of public broadcasting ever has been.
We're competing with commercial breakfast programs.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly.
So where does the argument stop?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think, exactly what they're asking for is to do what has been done in the UK, which is a root and branch review to work out exactly what the rationale for broadcasting is in the 21st century. I'm
sure the BBC also competes, though, with the other outlets.
We could talk about this forever.
We could.
Let's move on to Herald Sun about trees and families and winning.
Yeah, good on this farmer and his family for winning this battle through VCAT. All he wants to do is cut down a few trees on his property to make sure that he can increase the productive capacity of his land. A few people who don't live anywhere near the property complained that their view would be obstructed, and so took this guy to VCAT, and good on him for winning that. Sometimes it's just extraordinary the lengths that people will go to try and stop people doing what they want to do with their own land, and it's great to see that this farmer's won this battle.
Excellent.
One for the little
guy. Exactly.
Little guy.
Before we go, we're talking about phobias this morning that people have. Sharks, spiders, clowns.
Catfish.
Yes, tell us briefly your catfish phobia story.
Well, I was fishing in Miami last week, and we didn't have a net on board, and we pulled this thing up out of the water, and I decided to grab it with both hands, and unbeknownst to me, they've got these venomous barbs on either side, and I got two of them. So
you survived to tell the tale.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm going in for surgery straight after this. So.
All the best with that today.